Hey, welcome everybody. Those of you that are catching this on replay, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you being here. This is another week of Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Every Monday at noon, we do a live freight broker training. And this week, we're going to talk about the fastest way to go broke as a freight broker or freight agent. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Again, for those of you that are catching this on replay, welcome. Thank you. For those of you that are joining me in the stream, that's awesome. I appreciate it, whether you be on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're joining me. I appreciate you being here. Again, we do these lives every Monday at noon. So if you're not getting the emails or you're not on Facebook or you're not on YouTube, make sure you set some sort of a reminder, maybe in your iPhone calendar, maybe you tattoo it to your wrist so you don't forget. Monday at noon, we do these free live trainings. I don't charge anything for these trainings. And so we cover all kinds of different topics, sales related, marketing related, operational best practices. We talk about compliance. We talk about every component of the freight brokerage or freight agency business. And I do that every Monday at noon for free. They're called Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. So I had a contest that I was doing that I put in the description for people that were able to like, comment, and share before I went live. The challenge is that I'm not able to track a lot of that stuff. I just realized it now. I can't tell who's actually like, commenting, and sharing before I go live. So I'm actually going to be giving away, before we get into the training today, I'm going to be giving away a shirt, this shirt right here. Last week, I think it was Juanita Owens that got the shirt. This week, this shirt says, as you can see, it says Freightpreneur, someone who solves problems you don't know you have in ways you can't understand. This is free, right? If you're in the United States, it's actually free shipping. Anyone outside of the United States, you're going to have to choose to pay the shipping. It's probably not going to be worth the value of the shirt, but that would be completely up to you. Again, inside the United States, it's absolutely free. I'll cover the shipping cost. I'm going to pick one person. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do right now. Do me a huge favor. Before we go live here, I'm going to start giving some shout outs. But before we go live, if you'd like to be entered in the contest for the giveaway of that shirt, simply type in the comments. I want you to type in the comments, I'm ready. Okay. I'm ready. And I want you to share the stream. I want you to click share on the stream and say, I'm ready. After you click share on the stream, hit I'm ready. And then I'm going to randomly pick somebody in the stream, whether you be on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're at. And I'm going to give away this shirt. Then we're going to do some shout outs, and then we're going to start the training right away. Again, today we're going to talk about the fastest way to go broke as a freight broker or freight agent. You're definitely not going to want to miss this, because I see this mistake all the time. Particularly new people to the industry, I see this mistake all the time, and it drives me crazy. It's very frustrating. It's a huge waste of time, and it's a surefire way for you startups in particular to go broke. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, so we've got some people that are interested in the shirt, which is awesome. Very cool. So I'm going to give it one more minute. I want you to type in the box either on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you're watching this. I want you to type I'm ready, and I want you to share the stream. That means you have to hit the share button and you have to share the stream. Okay. So if you're on YouTube, you got to share it somewhere on one of your social channels. If you're on Facebook, obviously you can just share it on Facebook, but you need to share the stream. That's the price of admission to get into this contest. Again, it's not going to cost you anything other than 30 seconds of hitting a button. Okay. So I'm going to give about one more minute. I'm going to give about one more minute for people to get into the stream and for us to get everybody who wants to be a part of the contest going. And then we're going to dive in again. For those of you that are just joining me. Okay. Today we're going to talk about, in the Freight Broker Bootcamp Live that I do every Monday at noon, we're going to be talking about the fastest way to go broke as a freight broker or freight agent. And this is a common theme that I hear, particularly with new brokers. And if you listen to what I say, I'm actually going to share with you today how to avoid this pitfall and avoid all kinds of frustration and avoid all kinds of aggravation and time wasting, and to actually focus in on making money and leveraging your time as a way to generate profit. Okay. Which is really important to a startup, as you can imagine. Right. So As we're waiting for that, let me give a few shout outs here as we get in here. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in the stream. Welcome, Paul. Welcome, Sergia. Welcome, Denise. Welcome, Keith. Welcome, Atari from Martin, Tennessee. Welcome, Ian from Atlanta. Welcome, Jordan. Welcome, Lewis. Welcome, Alina. Welcome, Katie. Welcome, Glenn from Springfield, Missouri. Welcome, Nikki. Welcome, Jay Ward from Dallas, who's always here. Welcome, Jay. Welcome, Cindy Kane from Houston, who's always here. Welcome, the Patriot Marine, as always. Thank you for your service from San Diego. Okay, welcome, Laszlo from Hampstead, North Carolina. Welcome, Nicholas Curry from Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome, Marcel from Dallas. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Mark from Maine. Welcome, James from Lexington, South Carolina. Shout out to Amanda from Higdon, Alabama. Kellyanne from Clarksville, Maryland. Welcome. Welcome, Lyle. Welcome, Ian again. Welcome, Keisha. Welcome, Javinder. If I murder your name or your city state, I apologize. I got to disclaim that up front. Sometimes the type is really small and my vision's probably not getting better as I get older. And things go really fast in the feed here. So we got a lot of people that say they're ready. They want to win that shirt. Welcome, Tanya from Indiana. Welcome, James from Sawtee, Georgia. Welcome. We got a lot of people in the stream today. I'm excited. I appreciate you being here. So without further ado, welcome, Frank from Charlotte. Welcome, Teresa from Bowie, Maryland. Welcome, Tej. Welcome, Ken from Ogden. All right, listen, I'm going to give away the shirt. Okay. I've been getting a lot of feedback about this shirt. I bought some of these shirts for myself, just as kind of like a cool thing to do and to wear on some of these lives. And everybody's been loving these shirts. So I'm not selling these shirts right now. I don't really want to get into selling shirts, to be honest with you, but I am going to be giving them away from time to time. And today I'm going to give away one live. If you are the winner and you are chosen, all you need to do is on my Freight Broker Bootcamp Facebook page, you just need to private message me through that Freight Broker Bootcamp Facebook page. Just private message me. Your name, your address, and your size. Okay. I need name, address, and size. And then within the week, I'll send one out to you. You'll get it in the mail, and then you can enjoy it on a future live. Maybe even you can shoot a testimonial and send it over to me. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to feature that in some of the Freight Broker Bootcamp live community. So, all right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick a winner. So I'm scrolling through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in this area. I'm literally going to close my eyes. I'm going to scroll through using my mouse. I'm going to point to the first person I point to, and that's going to be the winner. Okay. And then we're going to dive into the training. So here we go. All right. Ready? My mouse I'm scrolling up and down, scrolling up and down. I don't know who's going to win. Here it is. The winner is, I got to do it again because there wasn't a winner in my window. So I'm going to scroll up and down. I apologize. I want to be honest here. All right. So here we are. The winner is Cindy Kane. Cindy Kane is the winner. Cindy Kane, you are the winner. So Cindy, all you need to do, my dear, is go to my Facebook page, private message me your name, your address, and your size that you want for this shirt. Whether it be for you, your husband, your kids, whoever you want, I'm going to send you one shirt. Make sure you send me that information and I'll get that out within the week. Appreciate you guys playing in this little contest here. Hope you guys enjoyed the little giveaway. Now we're going to dive into the training. Okay. And today, as I said to you before, I'm going to talk to you about the fastest way to go broke as a freight broker or freight agent. And I'm telling you, you want to avoid this mistake like the plague. So let me give you a quick summary, right? There's a huge misconception, particularly when you're new to the industry, whether you be a new freight broker or a new freight agent. You get on the phone with a shipper prospect and they say to you, I'll send you my load list. I'll put you on our email list where you'll get our daily load list. Okay. And all of a sudden the broker agent gets real excited and they say, I got a shipper. I'm so excited. And I understand the enthusiasm and I can appreciate that. But here's what happens. Here's typically what happens when you operate or try to get freight or make money by using a shipper's load list. Here's what happens. So the shipper says they're going to put you on the load list. They start sending you daily emails with a list of loads that are available. What you don't know is that that list of loads is going out to dozens and dozens of other carriers and other brokers. And what that shipper's doing is trying to create a cutthroat mentality where it's what I call jump ball freight. They throw the freight up in the middle, and whoever jumps the highest gets the ball, just like in basketball, okay, if you can visualize that. So here's what happens. You as the broker or agent, take that load list. Maybe you get 10 or 20 or 30 loads on that load list that are going to go out today or in the next couple of days. And then you rush to post all those loads to your load board, whether that be the DAT, whether that be truck stop, whatever load board you're using. And then all of a sudden you start getting a bunch of calls from carriers, and then you start making calls to carriers, and maybe you talk to 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 different carriers. And what happens is you finally are able to find a truck and negotiate the rate for that truck, because in most cases, those load lists will have a price. They set the price, okay? And so you finally find a carrier that has a truck available on the day you need at the price that you need. And then what happens is you call back the shipper, and the shipper says, oh, that's already been covered. Has that happened to any of you? Has that ever happened to you? So that's the pitfall. That's the problem. Just imagine all the work that you did. You got the email. You entered all the loads in the load board. You took a whole bunch of phone calls. You probably invested an hour or two worth of time. And then all of a sudden, you make the connection, you get really excited because you're going to make a couple $100 on this load. And then you call the shipper back or you email them and they say, oh, that load was already covered. So what happens is a lot of times that'll take the wind out of the sails of a brand new broker, and it'll really discourage them because of the amount of time and energy that they just invested to try to cover that load. And so in my opinion, and this is going to be very controversial, just so you know, there's going to be people that are watching this that are going to disagree with me. There are going to be other trainers that are going to disagree with me. There are going to be shippers that are going to disagree with me. I don't really care. I'm giving you my opinion after being an entrepreneur for 25 years and being involved in the freight and logistics company for 17 years, okay? And after working with thousands of different shippers, thousands of different brokers and agents and carriers throughout my career. And so I think that using load lists, okay, as a way to try to cover freight and make a profit is a waste of time. I really do, because I just described to you what happens 90+% of the time. It's not like that's a rarity. That's the norm. When you operate as a broker or an agent off of a load list, that's going to happen more times than not. You are going to call back that shipper. You're going to send an email, and that load is going to be covered because it's jump ball. Whoever jumps the highest right at that moment and has a truck available at that price is going to get the freight. Okay. So I learned very quickly not to waste my time there. And I taught all of my brokers, all of my agents, all of my people not to try to compete in that space. And so at first they resisted because they're like, well, how am I going to cover loads? Well, here's how you cover loads. Here's the alternative to working from load lists. Here's how you want to work with a shipper. So you contact a shipper. You start developing a relationship. They allow you to submit rates on different lanes where they need help, right? So let's assume we get to that point. You submit some rates, you negotiate the rates, and at that point, they approve you as a vendor and they approve your rates on those lanes, whatever it is, okay? Now, what happens in the way I teach it and the way it's best done to ensure that you're making money and not wasting time and getting frustrated is that when that shipper tenders the load, they don't send it out on a list to 10 or 20 brokers. They send it only to me. I am dedicated on that load. I might even be dedicated on that lane where I get all of the freight when that lane comes up, but I'm definitely dedicated on that individual load. And so what happens, I don't have to jump ball. I don't have to jump the highest. I don't have to scurry to post 20 loads. I don't have to field 100 phone calls and then call back and say it's been covered, because that load is mine. It's dedicated to me. And I now know that all I have to do is to connect the dots. I've got to post the load. I got to find a carrier. I got to negotiate a rate. I got to dispatch the truck. I've got to do check calls. I got to make sure it picks up and delivers on time in good condition, invoice the shipper, and I'm going to get paid. Okay. So there's the alternative. You operate as a jump ball broker, or you operate as a broker that becomes a dedicated resource that gets loads tendered only to them. Okay. So I want you to understand, it's really important, the distinction there. And so, that's a challenge for some people. Let me ask you, have you guys in the chat box, have you ever done what I described as that jump ball freight? Let me know reply below in the chat box and let me know. Have you ever gotten a list of loads from brokers, posted those loads, found a carrier, called back, and all of a sudden all you heard was, we've already covered that load? Has that ever happened to you? Let me know in the chat box if that's ever happened to you. I'd love to hear back from you guys as I grab a quick drink here. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Carlos says yes. Wolf says yes. Vincent says yes. There's tons. And so what happens is, what I suggest, there's a lot of people that this happened to, Katie and Nicholas, Tej. And here's what I suggest. Stop working on jump ball freight. Stop wasting your time. You think you're making progress, but all you're doing is filling up all of your time. All you're doing is busy. You're not productive. You're busy, but you're not profitable. You'd be better off spending your time prospecting for new shippers that are willing to dedicate freight specifically to you and are willing to tender loads directly to you, as opposed to just sending out a bunch of email lists to a list of 10 or 20 or maybe 50 different carriers and brokers and hoping that you can cover it first. Okay. And so, what I suggest, again, I jotted down some notes here. So what'll happen, the reason why shippers should want to dedicate loads to you and how you can sell that value to your shippers is that, number one, as a shipper, if they were to dedicate that lane to you or that load to you whenever it comes up, they're going to, number one, they're going to have less calls, they're going to have less emails, they're going to have less inquiries about that load, which means it's going to waste less time for them. It's going to be easier for them, because whenever that load comes up on the list, all they got to do is pull that load off, send it to you, and they can send the rest of the loads out to their list if they want. But they're going to have less inquiries and they're going to spend less time, right? They're also going to have more consistent rates, because working with you on a committed, dedicated rate, you're going to be able to understand the volume that they have on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And you are going to be able to establish rates that are much more consistent and less volatile for them. They're also going to get better service. The reason why they'll get better service is because you, as the broker, you can then develop a dedicated carrier base of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 different carriers that you're using to cover that lane consistently. And as that driver and that carrier gets more familiar with the pickup location and the type of freight and the drop location and how appointments are done and the route and all of that, the freight and the service is going to be more consistent. And I mean, those are just a few reasons why a shipper would want to, smart shippers, dedicate freight to specific carriers and to specific brokers, as opposed to doing the load list jump ball freight. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. If it does, let me know in the chat box. Give me an example. Give me a score of 1 to 10. 1 is, this just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think this is of any value. 10 is, I think this is exactly what I needed. This is the perfect topic for me as a new broker, someone that's looking to make money. I don't want to waste my time chasing my tail, getting very frustrated. I want to work with shippers that are committed to me in a real partnership where I know if they tender freight to me, I'm going to make money. So hit me up in the chat box and let me know 1 to 10. While we're waiting for that, listen, just so you guys know, again, I started my freight brokerage back in 2003, was very blessed, grew that company to over 80 million in sales per year, sold the company. But over 10 years ago, I started freightbrokerbootcamp.com, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program on the market. I've trained over 8,000 students, and we have a 100% money-back guarantee, 60-day, 100%, no questions guarantee on that. If you guys enroll in that, and you don't enjoy it, you don't like it, just simply send us an email and we'll refund your money. But listen, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check that out. Again, we've trained over 8,000 students. It's very inexpensive, very cost-effective, and it's 100% risk-free. So I think we're getting a lot of feedback from people that they understand the difference between working on load lists where there's no guarantee and a whole lot of frustration versus spending that time trying to find shippers that are dedicated, that are going to dedicate specific lanes and specific loads to them. So if you decide to go the load list route, the jump ball freight route, I promise you it's going to be one of the most frustrating and least profitable amount of time you're going to ever spend in your business. But if you take the extra time, you find the shippers that are dedicated to you, every load that they give you, the ball's in your court. You have an opportunity to make profit on every single one of those loads as long as you've done your due diligence, priced it properly. You're going to make money for the time that you spend finding and sourcing carriers. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. I'm going to be doing a live Q&A, so hold tight. For those of you that are curious, I'm going to do a live Q&A at the end. And I definitely want to do that. So let me get a quick drink here, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It's a really frustrating point, for new people, but they think that working off of load lists is the secret to success. And again, they get so excited when a shipper says, yeah, I'm going to put you on my load list. That really doesn't mean anything, right? But because it's some sort of positive feedback, it sounds like positive feedback. What happens is they get really excited. And then what happens is they get 3 or 4 or 5 of those shippers that are sending them load lists every day, but they're not making any money. They're posting all kinds of loads. They're taking all kinds of calls. They're negotiating with carriers. And then every time they cover a load, they call the shipper back. And what happens is the load is covered. And it's super frustrating. It's not profitable at all. But what you should be doing is dedicate your time to find shippers that are willing to tender loads only to you. We did not do any jump ball freight as my freight brokerage. We did not operate off load lists. When I had an inside force where, I had an inside brokerage where everybody worked for me, I forbade them from working load lists. They were not allowed to work load lists. They only could work on freight that was dedicated to them. Okay. Now, if you had a shipper that you've been doing business with for a long period of time and you were dedicated on specific lanes, and then they sent you out a list of things they needed help with that were not dedicated to you, you definitely want to try to help them there. But that should not be the foundation of how your relationship works with a shipper. Okay. So, and then the other part of that with the load list is shippers should never be the final determination as the rate. What I mean by that is you need to be able to do your own due diligence and submit your own rates to each shipper. In most cases, those rates are going to be negotiable, but the rates that they're going to send out on those load lists are typically going to be bargain basement cheapest rates, because those shippers are the shippers that are only looking for cheap rates. They're not focused on service. They're not focused on relationships. They're only focused on rates. Okay. And so I hope this guys helped you guys clear up that misconception, because I think it's a very important lesson that you need to learn early on. Don't waste your time on load lists and jump ball freight. Make sure you find shippers that are really interested in doing business with you. Okay. So I'm going to grab a quick drink and then we're going to go into Q&A. All right. So we've given away the shirt. We did the lesson. Now we're going to do live Q&A. Get ready with your questions. You guys can start typing the questions into the chat box. It can be about today's lesson. It can be about anything related to freight brokerage or freight agent. I can't promise that I'm going to get to everybody's question today, but here's what I can promise. I'll do my best. I come here every week. I try to answer different questions every week from different people every week to make sure everybody gets an opportunity. I will come back in later in the week. Typically, if you're catching this on replay or wherever you're catching this and it's not live, I will come back in and try to respond to a lot of the questions through the thread, through the feed below this. So let me grab a quick drink. Again, I said I was going to do this 5 times now, but I haven't. So let me grab a drink and we'll get the Q&A started. Oh my gosh. I get so worked up about that mistake because I see how frustrating it is. And I hate when students come back to me and tell me that that's happened to them and they learn the hard way that they've just spent a whole lot of time spinning their wheels. And it's just really disheartening when you're a startup and it doesn't have to happen. So from now on, I hope everybody pays attention. So, all right. So let's scroll through and see if we have some questions here starting to show up. All right, so let's see what we got. All right, so here's a good question. Amanda asks, how do you know which shippers have RFPs? This should eliminate jump ball on those lanes. The only way you're going to know if shippers have RFPs or bid packages where you could submit lanes to become dedicated is to ask. There's no central hub. There's no website. There's no list of people that shippers in any specific industry that are doing RFPs. There's no lists out there that you can buy or purchase for that. What you need to do as a part of your discovery in that first or second call, early in the discovery, is you need to understand how they work with different brokers, right? What's the relationship like? Do they have a bid or lane package? You're going to start asking those questions, and then they're going to start explaining to you how they work with brokers. And if they tell you that they work off of a load list that they send out to all of their brokers and carriers, then it's that at that point you need to explain why it makes more sense for them to dedicate specific lanes to you. And I explained to you why. It's going to be less stressful for them, less frustrating, less phone calls, more predictable, better rates, better service. And you simply carve out the lanes on that load list where you can fill the need and be a dedicated provider. And then at that point, explain to them the reasons why that will benefit them. And that's the best you can do. Some people that work in that load list environment, some shippers, they're never going to change. And you can't necessarily change the way they do business. But what you can do is you can change where you spend your time. Spend your time with shippers that don't operate off a load list. Okay. I see it a lot. You know where I see it a lot? I see it a lot in the lumber industry. I see a lot of lumber companies that do that. And they're not the only ones, but I see a lot of lumber companies that will do that. They'll just send out a weekly load list and then it's jump ball freight for the whole week to see who's going to jump the highest at the cheapest rate. And that's a surefire way to go broke. That's why I titled the training what I did. So good question, Amanda. I hope that helps. All right. Yeah, Lyle, there's not a licensing fee, but there is a UCR fee, Unified Carrier Registration, which is an annual fee for a Unified Carrier Registration. It's very inexpensive. It's less than $100 a year. That's the only renewal fee. Obviously, you have to pay for your bond, right? That would be an annual fee or monthly fee, depending upon how you have that set up. But from a licensing perspective, the only thing you have to do is file a UCR annually. So good question. Thank you. So here's a question. Do you believe cold calling carriers and shippers is the best way? Personally, I don't think it's the best way. It wouldn't be the best way for me, but it's for new people to the industry, you have to focus. It's progress over perfection. Early in my career as an entrepreneur, I did tons of cold calling, right? And it worked. I was able to get great clients cold calling. And even today, brokers and agents and different industries cold call and get clients, but the game has evolved. And so now we have a thing called the internet, which you guys are aware because you're watching me live stream this or catching this on replay somewhere. And so rather than cold calling, I prefer what I call warm calling. And warm calling is where you gather sales intelligence You gather information about the individual from either LinkedIn or a social profile or from Google. You gather information about the company from their website and from Google and from different platforms. And then you leverage that information as a way to create a unique and compelling conversation early on in your cold call, because you are different than the average cold call. The average cold call sounds like this. Here's what an average broker says, which drives me crazy. Hi, this is Dennis from XYZ Logistics. Hey, we've got trucks in your area on a regular basis. We'd love to haul your freight. What do we have to do? That's the laziest, least effective sales pitch you can have. That's just a straight cold call with no creativity, nothing unique, and you sound like everybody else. Now, here's the difference. Here's what a warm call sounds like. So you've gathered some sales intelligence, you call up this company and you say, hey, Joe, this is Dennis with XYZ Logistics. Hey, I know you're busy. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I read an article recently where you guys have recently acquired a company by the name of ABC out of Chicago. And I was just curious, how is that migration all working from a logistics perspective? How is that acquisition impacting your job? See, do you see the difference in how the lazy, not creative way cold calling version versus the warm calling version where I gather sales intelligence? What do you think that shipper is more likely to respond to the sounding just like every other broker, or taking a different approach that's very contextual and relevant to him? Of course, if we were to compete side by side, you making that cold call and me making that warm call, I would blow your doors off, right? It wouldn't even be a competition, right? And so that's what I believe in. I believe in warm calling. Now, from a carrier perspective, that's a little different. Most new brokers are going to get carriers by posting loads or searching on load boards that are specific to the lanes and loads that they're moving. That's how you're going to start to develop a carrier database. From there, load boards are going to be the primary source, of where you're going to originate carriers from. I'm not a big believer in just dialing a whole bunch of carriers, hitting a carrier database and just dialing a bunch of carriers. If you have specific needs where you've got volume freight moving in or out of a specific market, if you have time, it's probably not a bad idea to start, if you have the time and resources, having somebody call carriers that are domiciled in a specific area or run specific lanes. But ultimately, I think most of your intelligence about what carriers you're going to call, who you're going to talk to, the relationships you're going to develop, the lanes they're going to cover, and how you're going to have a mutually beneficial relationship are going to originate from load boards. That's how most of it starts. So I hope that helps. All right. So I'm scrolling through here. All right, so here's a question from Katie. Do you need contingent cargo as a new broker? Will a shipper not work with you if you don't? No, you do not need contingent cargo as a new broker. It's not a law. It's not a requirement. And most shippers do not require contingent cargo. Now, most large shippers do require some sort of contingent cargo policy, okay? But small to medium shippers, most of them don't. Now, some of them will, but the heavy majority of them do not require contingent cargo. What they do require is that the carriers are in full compliance and have typically at least $100,000 in cargo insurance and at least $1 million in BIPD, which is bodily injury personal damage insurance, right? Which is liability insurance. So they want to make sure that the carriers have cargo and liability, 100,000 and $1 million, but in most cases, they're not going to care if you have contingent cargo. If you start running into a situation where you start getting everybody in your niche or everybody on your list is asking for contingent cargo, you can always get it then, but I wouldn't get it in advance. I'm a big believer in kind of starting out lean. Don't spend money that you don't absolutely have to spend. And then you can also use that as a trial close with shippers. If they say, If you have contingent cargo, we'll work with you. And then at that point you say, okay, listen, I'm willing to get the contingent cargo, right? Contingent upon the opportunity to work with you. What would that look like? Right? How many lanes, how many loads, could we count on a daily or weekly or monthly basis? And then at that point, now you're basically financing the cost of that contingent cargo with that shipper, right? And so that's a great way to do it as well. So I hope that helps. Yep. Preet, I'm telling you, I know you're going to waste an enormous amount of time. I'm not trying to discourage you, but I want you to understand your best bet is to have a conversation with them and to differentiate yourself from everybody on that list and explain to them why, if they were to dedicate these 2 or 3 lanes to you, they're going to get better service, better rates, more predictable. Right. And if you explain that to them and say, all you have to do when these come up is just simply send them to me. You can check them off your list. You're never going to have to talk about them again. I will cover them. But the problem is that if they send them out to everybody, right, then at that point, it's not going to be the best carrier that's going to be hauling them. It's going to be the carrier that just happens to raise their hand first, right? So, and if they're not willing to work with you on dedicated freight, then move on and find somebody who is. So here's a question from Walter. Would you recommend making private appointments with these companies rather than doing everything over the phone? Walter, I have no problem with you doing face-to-face sales with people. Obviously, if they're local, you're not going to do an enormous amount of travel. You're not going to travel 3 or 4 hours for one appointment. But if you're in an area where you've got a density of shippers and that's your niche, you're focusing in on that specific niche, and you're able to go out and have face-to-face appointments, more power to you. I think face-to-face is always going to sell better than the phone. The challenge is that you're still going to have to get them on the phone. You're still going to have to cold call them. You're still going to have to set an appointment. If you set the appointment and you're able to set good appointments, I would say anybody who's willing to do an appointment with you, I would try to do face-to-face. The challenge with most brokers is they're not dealing with just local freight, right? I can tell you, I live in Buffalo, New York. And out of the hundreds of millions of dollars that I've done as a broker, I would tell you that in my local market, I would probably say less than $20 million of our total freight that we did in revenue generated locally in the Western New York market. Most of it generated, in the Northeast or in the Pacific Northwest or the Southwest or out of California, different lanes and different places where it just wasn't feasible for me or my salespeople or my brokers or my agents to go and do face-to-face appointments. So most of the sales happened over the phone, right? But if you have a unique situation where you can meet with people face-to-face, it's always a great bet. I would always choose face-to-face over the phone when you can, but in most cases, it's not going to be realistic depending upon your niche or the geography that you're working within. So I hope that helps. Good question. Thank you, Walter. Fernando, I don't understand your question, so you're going to have to restate it. There is no best type of freight in a given market, right? Some markets are more conducive to here's a question from what's the best type of freight to look for in the California area? I don't know. There's every type of freight in California. There is no best. California is a big port. There's ports in California, so you have a lot of freight coming in and out of the ports. You also you've got a big population, so you've got a lot of consumer goods, everything from food to bottled beverages to building supplies. There is no best, right? That's a very subjective question, and it's going to be a very subjective answer, right? So all you have to do is you have to decide either what you have some experience in, what you're interested in, or where you see demand, and then test that niche. That's all I can tell you. When I first started out, that's what I did. I saw that in the Northeast, there was a lot of trucks and not a lot of freight. So we did Northeast outbound freight because I knew that if I was able to get freight, I'd be able to cover it at a profit because I understood the pricing and the dynamics of the load to truck ratio coming out of the Northeast. And that paid off. That's how we started. Then that was van freight out of the Northeast going west and south. And then we expanded that niche and we went into flatbed and we went into refrigerated. Then we moved into other geographies. And eventually we did heavy haul and we did all kinds of different niches, all kinds of different equipment nationwide. But we had specific groups and agencies that were niched down in those specific niches. And that's how we grew the business. So I would suggest finding a niche, but I can't tell you what that niche would be. I gave you some examples of some stuff that would definitely seem like they would be moving very relevantly or very consistently in California. So I hope that helps. What about when they give you the price? Well, they can give you whatever price they want, but you're going to have to go and do the due diligence and see if you're able to make a profit on that load. If you're not able to make a profit on that load based on their price, my suggestion will be to submit a rate to them where you can make a profit. And maybe you are not the primary broker or carrier on that lane, but maybe you become the second or third carrier on that lane. And when the first carrier can't cover it for that really low rate, they're going to then contact you to cover the load. So you don't always have to go with the rate that the shipper gives you. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get the freight if you give them a higher rate, but it also doesn't mean you're going to get the freight if you give them a lower rate. But here's what you know, if you can't make money, there's no sense in doing it, right? So my suggestion to you is if they dictate the rates, you need to do your research and make sure that you're able to make a profit. If you're able to make an acceptable profit, then you can agree to that rate. If you're not, I would submit a higher rate where you are able to make the profit and just let them know that, yeah, we understand that, we probably can't be the primary, but if you ever have a situation where your primary carrier can't cover it at this rate, feel free to reach out to us. We're always going to have a truck at that rate. That would be my suggestion. All right, more questions coming in. Just give me a second here. So Philippe asks, he says, Dennis, I'm confused on how loads work. When do you establish flat rates with carriers? When do you bid for loads? So here's the process. You are going to identify a niche. You are going to make a list of shippers in that niche. You are then going to contact those shippers. During the first conversation, early conversations, you are going to ask for an opportunity to submit rates on the lanes where they have consistent freight. Sometimes that's referred to a bid package or a lane package. It might only be an Excel spreadsheet. They're going to send you the lanes, the origin zip, the destination zip or city state, and they're also going to give you like the equipment type. That's typically what it's going to look like. And then you're going to then provide them rates, your rate on what rate you would need to charge them in order to cover that freight to, and to allow them good service and for you to make a profit. So that's an example. It usually happens on the first couple phone calls where you're going to submit some rates on specific lanes. Maybe they're only going to give you one or two lanes over the phone or via email. Maybe they're going to give you an entire lane package. And that's typically how it's going to work. Now, some companies do annual bids, or they'll do like an RFP where they do that annually. They only do it once a year. And what'll happen is you're going to either be a part of that bid. They're going to send it out to everybody. They're going to take a big bid from hundreds of different vendors, and then they're going to rank those vendors based on availability and capacity. They're also going to rank them based on previous history. They're also going to rank them based on the rates. And at that point, that's going to be the shipper's rate guide. Whoever's the cheapest, they're going to go to first. If they can't cover it, they're going to go to the next one. If they can't cover it, they're going to go to the next one. Now, they do have some ability to be subjective where they can give lanes to carriers that provide better service, particularly in lanes where there's high demand and a lot of need, because they obviously have to get that freight out because they have to make their customers happy. So that's an example of how lanes and rating typically works as a broker or an agent. Hope that helps. How do you feel about trainers pushing to learn dispatching first instead of brokerage? I think dispatching, just learning the basic fundamentals of dispatching is an interesting part and an important part to learn, but it's not brokering. Just because you understand how to dispatch does not mean you have any clue how to broker, right? Because dispatching has no sales involved in it. There's no sales, there's no marketing. All you're doing as a dispatcher is working for an owner operator and going to load boards and finding brokers that have loads that match whatever that carrier's needs and desires are. If they want to run from New York to Texas and Texas to California and California to New York, you're only going to look for lanes or loads that are in that triangular of lanes based upon the equipment type that they have. So you're only calling brokers. So there's no sales. So there's very little. The learning how to post loads and to find trucks on a load board is the easiest part of brokering. The hardest part of brokering and the difference of where brokers actually make money, they succeed or fail, is in the sales and marketing component. It's their ability to differentiate themselves, develop relationships, and to understand the market in such a way that they can provide a high value service at a price that allows not only the shipper to be happy, but for them to make a profit, right? And so that's different than dispatching. I don't teach independent dispatching. The number one reason why I don't teach it would be very easy to teach independent dispatching, but I don't teach it because I believe that independent dispatchers is the equivalent of unauthorized brokering, right? You're basically brokering without a license. And most of the legal community agrees with me that because the definition of a freight broker is any party that receives compensation for arranging transport of a shipment from point A to point B, right? So you as an independent dispatcher are operating as a broker, even though you don't have a broker authority. And so I believe that that's the case. That's my opinion in it. There are people that operate that way. I don't begrudge anybody how they make their money, but ultimately that's the reason why I don't teach it. If you want to become a freight broker or freight agent, you're going to need to learn the fundamentals of how to sell above and beyond the ability to just post loads and call trucks off a load board. That's a part of it, but it's not the hardest part. Okay? So I hope that answers your question. Walter, there's no way to determine what shippers operate in a specific port. There's no list. All you can do is contact importers and exporters. And here's what you know. The biggest ports in the world, or biggest ports in the United States, there's a small list. There's a handful of really big ports. All you can do is contact importers, exporters, manufacturers, people that are moving goods in and out of the country, and ask them if they're moving goods out of Long Beach, right? Out of California. If they're moving goods out of that port, then at that point you can have a conversation with them. If they're not, then there's nothing you can do. You have to move on to the next one if that's your niche. But there's no way that I know of that you can buy any sort of a list of importers and exporters that are moving freight out of Long Beach port. You can buy a list of importers and exporters. You can buy a list of companies that are import and export in general or in specific industries, but it's not going to define if they move out of Long Beach. And not that I've ever seen, at least. All right, Eduardo, good question. I'm about to be a freight broker, but I have a bad accent. You think it's going to be a problem? Nope, I don't think it's going to be a problem. It's only going to be a problem if you make it a problem. Now, of course, you have to be able to be understood. So if you're speaking Spanish and they're speaking English, that's going to be a challenge. But if your English is sufficient enough where they can understand the fundamentals of what you're saying, and you can continue to work on improving your English, right? I don't think you're going to have an issue. The reason being is because the majority of the logistics and transportation industry has all kinds of ethnicity in it. You have Russians, lots of Russians in trucking. You got lots of Spanish speaking people, and you got Ukrainian people. You got French. You got all kinds of nationalities that are in the trucking industry. I'll give you a perfect example of a past student who is still to this day lives in India. His name is Yogi Goswami. He lives in Goa, India. He's never been to the United States. He doesn't speak perfect English. He it's not his first language. And he's built a multi-million-dollar freight brokerage from India. And he's a perfect example of someone that several years ago, before he took my course and before he took action and really dug into the industry, he was in the same boat as you. He's probably listening to this live today. He does typically chime in from time to time. He still to this day has an accent, and he's been able to build a multi-7-figure brokerage, which by next year we're projecting will be over $10 million in sales. And he still lives in India and has broken English. So I hope that answers your question. All right, guys, one more question I'm going to field today. I'll try to come back into the comments. Again, before I close out, if you guys are curious, if you enjoyed the training today, awesome. Thank you so much. Share the stream. Make sure you hit the like button. Really appreciate it. Getting the word out and let everybody know about these weekly freight broker trainings. Secondly, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or freight agent, make sure you check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Most cost-effective, comprehensive online freight broker training program. Very cost-effective. We have gold memberships, which are 1 year. We have lifetime memberships where there's no ongoing costs, but you get dedicated VIP support. Check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. And again, we offer a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So last question for today. Let's see what we got here. All right, Garen asks, is it difficult to obtain a broker bond? The answer is no. It's not difficult unless you have really, really bad credit. Actually, if you have average to above average credit, it won't be difficult at all. You can go on Google, search for freight broker bond. You'll find dozens and dozens of different bond providers where you can simply go in, tell them that you're a new broker. They're going to run your credit because the broker bond is determined heavily based on your personal credit. If you have average to above average credit, you're not going to have an issue. The typical cost is somewhere between 2 and 5% of the bond, which is like $1,500 up to maybe $3,700 a year for the bond cost. And now if you have bad credit, then it can be challenging because number one, there'll be some companies that are willing to underwrite your bond, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. It might be $5,000, it might be $7,000, it might be $8,000 a year because you are high risk because you have bad credit. So what I suggest with those people, rather than paying those exorbitant rates, what I suggest is that you start out as a freight agent. Don't worry about becoming a freight broker out of the boat, right out of the gates. Become a freight agent. My average agent, the last year I owned my brokerage, made over $107,000 from home. Now, I can't promise that that's going to happen for you. And as a matter of fact, the majority of the people that start a freight agency won't make that money. I'm not promising you that. But what I can promise you is that there's an incredible opportunity to get started as a freight agent, make a lot of money with way less risk, way less cost. So start as a freight agent. Perfect example. I had Monica Gonzalez on my podcast or on this live a couple months back. We were talking about how she made as an agent last year, 2019, she made over $300,000 in profit in her pocket after all expenses, over $300,000 in 2019. And she's an agent. And she doesn't want to own a brokerage. She's very happy. She has very little risk. She gets to work the hours that are workable for her. She makes an incredible living. It's allowed her to buy a horse ranch. It's allowed her to do all kinds of things that she's always dreamed about. And so if you decide to become a broker and you can afford it, fantastic. If you can't and you're concerned about the startup costs, become an agent. The cost is way lower. The risk is way lower. And here's my theory. If you can't make money as an agent, you're never going to make money as a broker. And if you're a successful agent, you can always convert over to your own brokerage later. So I hope that helps. Garen, thank you for asking the question. Thank you all for being here live. I truly appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you share the stream. Make sure you set a reminder. If you're on YouTube, make sure you like the YouTube page. Make sure you make sure you follow the page. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you get notified every time I go live. Again, truly appreciate you guys being here. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next week.